Betting, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Bet with the Best podcast. Its mission is to explore better ways to bet on races, to seek out new, successful players, and to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. Welcome to episode 7 of the Bet with the Best podcast. We've had 6 great guests already. It's all evergreen content, so if you haven't listened to any of the previous podcasts, I encourage you to go back and listen. Lots of great knowledge was shared in every one of those. And we have another great guest this week. He's from the state of Connecticut. He's been a professional player for almost 40 years. Many people know him as the Wizard. I want to introduce Michael Kipnis to the Bet with the Best podcast. Hello, Michael. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me on the show, Christopher.
Well, thank you for joining us. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And I usually like to start it out by asking the guest to give us what I call their horse player origin story, how you got started in the game, and how things evolved over time to the point where you are today. So why don't you share with the listeners your origin story, Michael?
I grew up in New York City on the Upper West Side, and I grew up around gamblers. Not professional gamblers, just sick gamblers, but characters, Damon Runyon characters, ones that when they died, it all went away. And that was New York City back in the 60s. My father was the master king gambler, a very charismatic man who worked in the garment industry, but his passion and love was betting horses. And his second passion was betting on games. And despite all the efforts to become successful, he failed miserably. But growing up in that era with my father and his friends, it began the planting of the seed of me becoming a gambler. And that was at a very young age. So he would surround himself with characters, or what he would refer to as his cronies. And there was the Leprechaun, Brucey the Brain Braverman, the Spider, Al the Big Nose Wilner, and Harry Baum, and Manny the Q Stick. And all these guys were always around me growing up. And every Saturday, me and my brother would sit in between a pack full of these friends of his in a big Lincoln Continental with the windows closed up in 95 degrees weather, and the Leprechaun smoking his cigarette, and he had an indentation where the cigarette laid. And me and my brother, as little kids, on our way to Belmont Park or Aqueduct on a Saturday. And this was a ritual every week, every Saturday. And my father would say to us, me and my brother, when we first started going, it was probably 1963, 1964. So I was at the time 5 or 6. And maybe it was earlier. I have no idea. I don't remember going back, any earlier than 5, but I was probably in that car as a baby. And he would say to my brother and I, "Get dressed. We're heading to the open air synagogue." And I'll never forget that, because I was bar mitzvahed years later in a synagogue. And I put it all together that he referred to the Belmont Park and Aqueduct as the open air synagogue. So, so I found that very extremely funny. And when I thought about it, and this trip with all these characters um, happened every Saturday religiously. And my father, we were little kids, and obviously we couldn't bet. We would just go to the track as a family. My mother was never in the picture. So it was just my father, my brother, and I, a younger brother, and these characters. And, every race he'd hand me a $2, two singles, and he'd say, fetch me a beef bouillon. And bouillon was like chicken's broth in a big metal canister. And I would bring him his bouillon, and it was like $1.25. And sometimes he'd take his change, and sometimes he'd throw me a quarter. But if he was winning, he'd say, keep the change. And that became my allowance money as I was growing up, and what became of my bankroll later on. And that's how I first started. My father later on would say to people, this is when I started the wizard sheet back in the 80s. And people would ask my father, like, your son is a professional handicapper. I put myself through school. I never was much of a student. I ran a restaurant that my family owned. But I went into the profession of professional handicapping. And my people would ask my father, your son's a handicapper. Like, why? Why is he a handicapper? And he would always say the same thing. If I took my son to the movies as much as I took him to the racetrack, he'd be an actor instead of a handicapper. So that was the origin of the birth of me gravitating to the track, gravitating to gambling, loving the action, always living on the tight wire without falling off, and many, many stories along the way to starting out in 1986 as a professional handicapper and dubbed myself the name The Wizard. And that was how it started. And along the way, so many stories, so much education, so many more characters I ran into, a world rich of this life, of this Damon Runyon world that does not exist in any form today.
Well, that's really interesting. Please share with us maybe some of those lessons learned in the early years, and maybe some of the another interesting story or some of the characters that really influenced you as a horse player. I mean, kind of how you evolved from that kid in the back of the Lincoln at a real young age, up until you started making a living playing the game.
Well, my father was always a follower. And what I mean by that was he never handicapped on his own. He did at the trotters. Like, we would go to the trotters on occasion, but it was at night. So, we'd only go if we did a daily double, like a double header, he would refer to. If we went to the track and then he won, we'd go to Roosevelt or we'd go to Yonkers Raceway. There, he had his own opinion, and it was a pretty good one, but he stunk as a gambler. And one thing that I noticed about him is that most of his money was bet in the daily double. So, like, if he had like $1,000, 600 was bet in the double. And I never really understood that until I understood it. That he wanted to start off on a good on the good feet, like he wanted to win early, and it was all. And if he didn't, it was probably all downhill after. He was chasing, and that was him. He was not. Uh, he was not professional gambler, to say the least. He was a very compulsive gambler. So he was a follower, and there was this man who was my teacher. We all have teachers in life. If you're playing the piano, you have a piano teacher. Your chess, you have a chess master. My father had a handicapper, and his name was Red. That was it, Red. And Red lived in Brooklyn, and I've always knew Red. Like I always knew Red as a kid. He was a character, but not part. He was the guy that released the horses. He wasn't in the Lincoln. Once in a while, when we were in Saratoga and Red would come with his wife, and we would do a Saratoga Green Mountain racetrack daily double day. The day in the afternoon at Saratoga, get into the car, and then drive to Vermont for Green Mountain thoroughbreds. And it was like a fair circuit where fixes were galore. Red was the greatest handicapper in the history of the game. He was the beginner of numbers before there were numbers. You've heard of Rogozin sheets, heard of Jerry Brown, the Thorograph sheets, right? I presume.
Oh, yeah.
He was the beginner. He was the guy before any of that existed. He was the guy that fed Julie Fink and the Speed Boys horses based on his numbers that killed bookmakers all over the country. It wasn't Rogozin. It wasn't Jerry Brown. It was Red. That was the guy. Believe it or not, Red was a taxi dispatcher in Brooklyn. So he worked the lobster shift from 12 to 8, dispatching taxis when there were taxis. Now it's Uber and Lyft, right? It was taxis, yellow cabs. And he was the dispatcher. And through the night, he would mark up his racing form and do his numbers and do his magic. And he did this for many years. And he fed Julie Fink horses, Speed Boys, named after Red. And he was the guy. My father was a charmer. And he was a salesman in the garment district. And he was great at it. He was charming. And he was the son of Joe Kipnis, who ran New York City, basically, back in the 70s and 80s. Had a restaurant called Pier 52, produced Broadway shows, owned other restaurants. I worked for my grandfather as a kid. I was the only one in the family till my aunt came in. At a young age, I was there at 16, 17. My father never went into the business. My grandfather's a whole nother story altogether. But the biggest gambler of them all, because he gambled on restaurants and theater. My father's genes came from my grandfather, but he found horse racing and sports as his hobby, so to speak. So Red was the guy. And I used to go take the train, cut school, go to Brooklyn, and learn the game through Red. Learn about how cheaters cheat, how larceny is done, how numbers are done, how you figure everything was at play with Red in handicapping a horse race. Numbers was his basis. I'm not a numbers guy. I've never been a numbers guy. I learned the larceny end of it. That's what intrigued me. I wanted to know who was the guys, who cheated. And I wanted to tag along. I never wanted to be the judge and jury. And to this day, I'm not the judge and jury. But if you're winning 35%, I want to know. I want to be aboard. I want to be aboard for the ride. I need you guys. My whole success, part of my success, not all of it, is based on these guys. When they die off, most of the wizard will die off. So I need them. I need the Oscars. I need, so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. I don't want to mention names because, again, I need them. I want them to like me, and I like them. And I do send them a Christmas card. So Red was the guy that I learned from. And on his day off, I would cut school, and me and Red, as I got older, 14, 15, 16 years old, we would go to the Port of Authority, take a bus to Bowie and Liberty Bell down in Maryland and Pennsylvania, and bet horses. Now, the crazy thing about it is, Red couldn't bet more than $2. He would go into a sweat if he bet more than $5 a race. So when we went on these trips, I had some money from just building a bankroll, collecting coins from my father, fetching his bullion for the years, little things I did. I was a street rat. So I even used to bet for Red. Okay, Red, I'm going to bet $20. Here's $6 for you. It wasn't about the money for Red. It was about the conquest. It was about accomplishing the task without risk of money. Couldn't deal with it. But his wife, Millie, bet thousands. His wife, Millie, was the gambler. Now, Red didn't know Millie was gambling that kind of money until Millie died, and Red found hundreds of thousands of dollars in his railroad flat in Brooklyn under the floorboards where Millie hid the money. So Red didn't know that. Millie made a fortune on Red. But Red never knew. Red never knew Millie made the money and where she hid it. And when she died, the family came over, tore up the floorboards, and there's hundreds of thousands of dollars stuffed away. Then Red died soon after, and the family took the cash. So Red was so good, Christopher. He was so good that the New York Racing Association banned him because Red would give horses out to my father, who would then release them to all these cronies. My father, you had to buy a ticket for Red and hand him a ticket, $10, $20, and Millie confiscated the ticket. Red wanted no part of the tickets. So my father built this club of Garmin Center gamblers but nobody knew who was giving my father these plays. And Red was banned from the track because they considered him a Russian spy, a member of the KGB. So he couldn't enter the racetrack. He was banned. So he'd set up a beach chair outside the racetrack with Millie. He couldn't be in the racetrack because he was dubbed a KGB member, which was false. But that's what they dubbed him, entitled him, to ban him from the track, which was like, a complete joke and a farce because business went on. It continued for years. It was just one of many of the stupid things that that I never could understand about Naira or the industry. So this went on, and Red would release these horses, and he was actually in competition with a guy named Manny Kalish. And Manny Kalish was perched in the clubhouse with his clientele. And my father, Red had his clientele, but my father acted as the beard. He enjoyed that role as hiding the mystery man, which was Red, and releasing these horses to these high-end garment industry guys. It was a show. It was the greatest circus. It made Barnum and Bailey Circus look, look like a subpar show. I mean, look like it was the greatest show on earth. That was the greatest show on earth, not Ringling, Barnum, and Bailey. And I lived this life of, this Red, betters, doing my own thing, betting my own horses at the track by tugging on a guy's jacket and say, could you bet $4 for me? And the guy would look down on me and go, sure, kid, if you give me $1. And I gave him $1. And then I used to, bet on my own with a bookie, Willie the Doorman. Was the doorman the building next to me in Manhattan. And I used to fetch him the National Armstrong, which was the card, the bookies paper, where all the entries from every track with the odds were listed every day. And that I used to fetch for Willie the Doorman, who in return allowed me to play some money with him on horses, bet horses with him. So he was this is before OTB. So I had action off the racetrack. When I was young, I was betting horses with Willie the Doorman at 12. So all this education was something you couldn't get in any school. Impossible. It was the greatest education of not only learning how to bet horses, but learning about people, learning about the game. And I look back on it now, I'm 65. And I look back on it now and I say, hot damn, like this is the best. This doesn't exist nowadays. Like it's not even remote. It's in another stratosphere. The education I got. And I continued doing this even when I got the job working in the restaurant business and working my way up, running one of the biggest restaurants in the world. But every day, no matter what I did, I always had a racing form. And I always made bets. I could have been, lunchtime, and I have to get in a suit and walk the floor of the restaurant. But before I put on my suit, I would go to OTB and put in my action. And then after the lunch crowd, listen to Harvey Pack at the track, or whatever I figured out to find the results, run back to OTB. It was always part of my life and part of my tapestry of horse playing. And I was in the restaurant business, and in my 20s, I got married. And Me and my wife, we used to take trips to Monmouth Park. A matter of fact, you go to Belmont, Aqueduct. Matter of fact, we got married and it was at the Knights of Columbus. It was not your usual wedding. You know, we made a few dollars, more gifts than cash. And the first thing we did was we went on our honeymoon to Boston to a Police concert and then to Suffolk Downs. But when I was courting my wife, I didn't have much money. I had left the restaurant business and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I remember I had like $100. And I said to Noreen, I want to take you to Montauk Point, to Gurney's Inn for a night, a trip. And nothing to do with racing. And I booked the hotel. We had an old Volkswagen beat down Beetle. And the hotel was expensive. It was like $69 back then. I had 100. I didn't have enough money for food. I bought a bottle of wine. And I said to Noreen, her name, that Oscar Barrera has 4 horses entered today off the claim, switching to Steve Coughlin. And all 4 will win. And I put some money in my OTB account. And I said, when we leave New York City, by the time we get to Montauk, we will have more money. We will have enough money to pay for our trip, eat whatever we want, and buy another bottle of wine and have money to spare. And she said, how's that? I said, Oscar will win 4 today on Saturday. And I'm going to parlay a $20 bet. And we got on the car, and the races were like 3, 5, 7, and 8, or something, close together. I would time it to stop at a phone booth, put in my coins, call Pack at the Track, third race report, and Oscar won the first race. Oscar won the next one. Oscar won the next one. Oscar won the 4th one, all off the claim. And I said to Noreen, thank you, Uncle Oscar. Just paid for our trip. And that's what I mean. These guys, Peter Ferriola, Oscar Barrera, there were a bunch of them. The guy that used snake venom. There were a bunch of them. They paid for trips, my college education, my marriage. God bless them all. But the biggest score was the one that got me to be the wizard. And that's a story, if you want to hear it.
Yeah, I usually like to have each guest talk about, memorable score. So go for it.
Okay. So I was in the restaurant business, and I decided the restaurant wasn't for me. And I was out of the business, and I had just had a baby girl named Jessie. And I was broke. And I said, what the hell did I do with my life leaving the restaurant business, making, back then, maybe I made $25,000 for the year, it was back in the 70s. I don't know, maybe I didn't even make that much. My grandfather always underpaid me. So I needed a score. I had started the wizard sheet. So, okay, I decided I wanted to do a sheet. I had gone to the track and gotten to know Lawton, the Centaur, the people behind National Handicap, Connie Murgis, who his sheet was forget the name of his sheet, but he had a sheet out at the racetrack. Lawton was the big sheet. And I got to know all of them. But the Centaur became a friend. And actually, so I'm out of the restaurant business and I get to know Paul Setnor, the Centaur. And his sheet was great. It was different. It actually had commentary, like lines, The Lawton was like working well, sharp today. It was the standard garbage. But the Centaur actually had some intelligence to his sheet. And I loved his insignia or his stamp, like his profile on the sheet, like his cover. And it was a centaur, a half horse, and the head was him. And I loved it because his name was Paul Centaur and he named it the Centaur. I loved it. So he gave me a job to do a phone service. And I'd sit at my desk and he had clients call me. And I would give his selections for the day. So they paid him for a phone service. The phone number rang me. I had a landline phone. And I would say, hello, this is Michael Kipnis. I wasn't the wizard then. I'm Michael Kipnis, employer of the Centaur. Here are the Centaur's picks for the 9 race card. And I'd run down the picks. But the Centaur gave me a bonus. He threw me a carrot and he said, Michael, I allow you to give your one best bet of the day. So I had an audience. After I gave the Centaur's picks, I said, now I will release my selection of the day. And I would give my selection. Well, I did this every racing day. And to my amazement, I was like picking, Centaur would have his share of winners. But out of 30 days, I'd have 25 winners. Like I'd give out all these winners. And then it became, hello, this is Michael Kipnis, employee of the Centaur. Here are the Centaur's picks. And the customer would say, forget the Centaur. What's your pick of the day? Then we'll get on to the Centaur. So it got back to the Centaur. And the Centaur said, I'm very upset with you. You have an 800, you have a number, whatever, 800 number he set up or whatever it was. And you're supposed to give my picks. And then you give one pick. You're stealing my customers. They want your picks. That's the feedback. I said, Centaur, I am giving your picks. I'm not taking your customers. I just happen to be picking a lot of winners. And people are saying, we want to know your picks. Then the Centaur, like it's an afterthought. Centaur fired me. Wouldn't talk to me. I was done in the 800 number business. So now, and he was paying me. I was actually making some money. And so I lost my job. He was always angry. Didn't let me sit next to him. Lawton hated me. Everyone hated me. It went around that I was a stealer of people's products. And all I was giving was one pick a day. That's it. So what do I do with my life? I just lost my only job with the Centaur, hitting 80% winners. What do I do? So every year, I used to watch The Wizard of Oz. And, my child is born. She's 6 months old. Put her on my lap to watch The Wizard of Oz. She's a little baby. She's not watching. I'm just holding her. And all of a sudden, I thought to myself, I'm going to start my own sheet, and I'm going to call it The Wizard. So I go in and I tell my wife, Noreen, starting a sheet. Okay. What is that? What are you going to do? Well, first of all, I'm going to call it The Wizard. And she said, why The Wizard? I said, well, The Wizard of Oz, he's behind the curtain all the time until he reveals himself at the end. And he's controlling the environment from behind the curtain. He's a mystery man. He's the wizard. I like that. I like being a mystery man. So I said, let me find somebody to create a logo of a wizard looking out of a crystal ball with binoculars. So I found a graphic artist. He created the image. And I name my best bets to this day, Wizard's Crystal Ball. Best bet. So I said, how do I do a sheet? What do I do? Where do I start? How does the Centaur do it? He never told me. How does Lawton do it? How do these sheets exist at the racetrack? Nobody would tell me. Couldn't find, I didn't know. So I said to myself, well, if you get a piece of paper and you pick your horses, and I wanted to do it like the Centaur. I wanted to write something about the horse, whether it was trips, a trip I saw, breeding I liked, trainer angle. I wanted to put it on paper. I wanted to make every issue a handicapping lesson. And I put that on my sheet, on the cover. Every issue a handicapping lesson. So I decided to make it yellow with the red wizard. And that became my brand to this day. If you go, I'm not only on the track at Saratoga, but it's the wizard on yellow paper. So I figured out I had to get some decent quality paper. I had to get a typewriter. And I didn't know how to type. My wife did. And I had to get a machine to run. I had to get the covers printed. And then I had to get a machine to run off a machine in a folder to run off copies and a folder to fold it into a trifold. That was my design, or that's how I wanted it to look. So I went out and I bought a secondhand Gestetner machine, and then a typewriter and mimeograph, like paper where you type it, you peel it, and you put it on this machine, and you roll off a template, like an actual mimeograph of your sheet. So my wife would get up. Then I said, okay, I print the sheet. What the hell do I do with the sheet? So I said, newsstands. The Centaur sells at newsstands. Lawton sells at newsstands. The Wizard will be on the newsstands in New York City. And every place that these sheets were sold were buying OTB. Made sense. So I would get up at midnight with my wife, and I would recite what I wanted to say about the horse, each of my selections. She would type it. We completed the 9 race card. We'd run off copies, 100 copies, fold them. Then I would knock on the door, lived on 119th Street, like Columbia University, in a railroad flat. And I would knock on the door of my neighbor, Phil. And Phil was a former Vietnam vet who was highly mentally ill, smelled, had 100 dogs and cats. You could smell his apartment from a block away, but he loved the horses. And he needed money. I couldn't pay him much. What could I pay him? $5? But I needed somebody to be in the car. So when I pulled up to the newsstand, I didn't have to leave the car unattended. And he could navigate because we were fighting the milk trucks and the delivery guys at 4 a.m. So I needed a partner to help me. So he'd get in the car and I'd endure the stench of Phil as I'm delivering these sheets at different near different OTBs at newsstands. And I'd give each newsstand 10. And how it worked was you delivered 10, the next day you're delivering a new 10, you get your returns. So if you get 6 back, it means you sold 4. Math, simple math, right? 4 times, so if I sold it for $2, they get $1, I get $1. I sold 4, I should get $4. And I figured if I sold 4 or 5 at 10 different newsstands, it was a nice day. Unfortunately, I would bring 10 and get back 10. No money. This went on for weeks. Nobody bought the Wizard. Now I'm dead in the water. And a few weeks into this, I go to my father. My father goes, "How you doing, kid?" Oh, done. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. You should have stayed in the restaurant business. Or you should have sold clothing like me. I said, "Dad, I don't want to go in the restaurant business. I hated it. I don't want to be in your business. I want to be a handicapper." He goes, "Can't. I know you're good. Nobody's going to buy your stuff." I said, "I know, Dad. Nobody's buying my stuff. I'm eating Rice Krispies every night." Next week, do the same. Get in the car with the stench Phil. Go to the newsstands. Give my 10. But this time, I'm selling 2. I go to the next stand. I'm selling 3. All of a sudden, out of thin air, the Wizard's selling. Now, I'm picking a lot of winners, but this went on for weeks where nobody bought anything, so it didn't matter. But all of a sudden, something was happening. I was selling. I would collect $2 here, $4 here, come home to my wife at the end of the morning. We made $26, Noreen. She'd say, "Whoop-de-doo." Congratulations. We can now have a Cheerios instead of Rice Krispies. So I'm saying, how am I selling all of a sudden? And I go to my dad. I go, Dad, I'm selling. He says to me, son, I know. I felt so bad for you, I sent my friends out to buy your sheet. So there were no customers, real customers buying my sheet. My father's felt so bad for me that he told his cronies, do the kid a favor, make him feel good and buy a sheet. So every sheet I sold were to his friends. And then his friends gave up on me. They didn't want to do it anymore. I'm dead. I'm now dead. So I said to Noreen, look, I've been doing this 6 months. We have no money. We're broke. We hardly can make rent. I said, give me 2 weeks and I'll pack it in. I failed. I can't do this anymore to the family. Back to the restaurant business, to a life of purgatory. So I said to myself, I gotta find a horse. I gotta make a score. My only chance. But how the hell am I gonna make a score when I have no money? And I need big money, not just chump change. So back then in the 80s, OTB was huge. And the pick six had just started. And the pools were massive. If there was a carryover, a one-day carryover in a pick six, the pool was $100,000. That much money was bet on the pick six because OTB was flourishing. And I realized if I'm going to make a score, it's got to be the pick six. I got to go for it all. So every day I'd buy the racing form on 72nd and Broadway. And the owner of the newsstand was the rabbi. And his co-worker was Papa Paulie. And I never took the top racing form. It had to be pristine, no wrinkles, pull it from the middle of the deck. And I go there on a Friday. It's a Friday night. And I go, Rabbi, I need a form desperately. I need a winner. The rabbi pulls a form from the middle of the deck. It was pristine, no wrinkles. And he looks at me and he goes, he called me Kid Wonder, always when I was a kid. He goes, Kid Wonder, you're going to have a good day tomorrow. I said, yeah, right. I pull the form out, bring it home, get the form, bring it home. Looking at the form, just, is there a play to be made? It was a carryover, $100,000 to the Saturday card at Aqueduct. Big card. All of a sudden, I get to the 5th race. And there's a horse, ironically, by the name of Tough Spot. Tuff Spot. And it was trained by a guy named Nick Fiore with Antonio Grael in the saddle. And if memory served me right, and I used to keep my racing forms, Nick Fiore, Tough Spot, and Antonio Grael hooked up 2 years earlier for a score at 50-1. That race was not on the racing form page. You had to go back. For some reason, I remembered that. I never bet it. I just remembered the score and the name Nick Fiore and Grial. And I looked at the fifth race, and it was the third leg of the pick six. And his form was ugly as can imagine. I also knew it was the only horse that Nick Fiore had. He was a former assistant to Gasper Moschera, went on his own. He only had one horse, of which he owned. The form was ugly, beaten off for many races, terrible. But Grial hadn't been aboard. It was other jockeys. And today he was going back to Grial. And I was scratching my head and said, "Why Grial?" And I went back to my pile of racing forms. And the same move was happening. Bad form, switched to Grial, and he was stretching out from a sprint to 2 turns. Same MO. But it was ugly. The running lines were ugly. But I said to myself, it's go day. It's go day. So I said, this is my only chance. And I map out a pick six. And I map out a pick six, signaling Tough Spot, who's 50-1 on the morning line. And the comment in the racing form was, "You've got to be kidding." And I map out a pick six, and it comes to $192. I counted up my money, $98 to my name. That's all I had. I couldn't make the pick six ticket. So I decided, I had a friend that I would go to the track with. And he was a McGill graduate from Toronto. And McGill is like the Harvard of Canada. Literature major, smart guy, professional horse. That's how he spent his life. He could have been anything. You know, he could have been a professor, but he was a horse player. And we were friends. I met him at the racetrack. And I said, called him up. I said, "Joe, will you be partners in a pick six with me?" He goes, "What's the price? What's the cost of the ticket?" I said, $192. Something like 192, I think it was. And he says to me, "Do you have a single?" I go, "Yes, I do." "Who is it?" Tough Spot, race 5, outside post 12, going 2 turns on the inner track at Aqueduct. Gets the paper, he looks at it. And by then I was the wizard to him. He goes, "Wiz, are you on drugs?" I said, "No, not on drugs. I don't smoke pot. I don't do anything." "Well, you're lying to me. You're on drugs. This horse is a hope and a prayer, has no chance. Why am I going to waste my money on this piece of crap?" I said, "Joe," and I told him the story about Tough Spot. He goes, "Wiz, I got money, you don't. I'm not down and out, you're down and out. You got a family with a new baby, I'm single. I feel bad for you, I like you. I'll blow that money to show you my friendship to you." So we go to the track. Gives me his money, I have my money. We map out a pick six. Singling tough spot. And I have my sheet. Actually, my dad paid off the guy at the track at that time to get my sheet on the track. I didn't tell you that. And I wasn't selling anything at the track either. I was bringing the sheets to the track that Noreen would run off at night. I had extras, gave them to the track. They put it on the stands. Nobody bought. Nobody bought my sheet. And I was picking winners. Nobody cared. Nobody knew. They didn't buy it. So we get to the track. I put in the ticket. We win the third race, right? We win the fourth race. And now Tough Spot is running in the fifth race. So he's in post 12. He's in post 12. And I make him a best bet of the day on my sheet. Crystal ball best bet. I said, what the hell? If I'm going to go out, I'm going out in flames. My top horse wins the third race. My top horse wins the fourth race. Now Tough Spot's running. Goes to the lead. He's fighting with another horse. They're dueling into the far turn. I'm in the clubhouse and I'm watching with my binoculars. He's dueling for the lead as they start turning for home, and he starts dropping back. Now he's second. Now he's third. I turn to Joe and I go, I'm getting out of here. I'm done. I have no more left in this game. I turn my back and I start walking away. And Joe shouts out, Wiz, he's coming again. I turn around and I watch Grael go to the rapid fire whip. He inches closer back to the leader. And now he's hooked by the favorite on the outside. They battle tooth and nail to the wire. I don't know who wins the race. It's a photo finish. He's 37-1. That's what he goes off at. They put his number up, and then there's an inquiry, and his number begins to blink. And I looked to the sky, and I said, God, why are you doing this to me? Why are you punishing me for this, for doing this profession? And I'm just standing there in disbelief that I win a race and they put the inquiry sign up. I didn't know for what. There was no they didn't show you the replay of the inquiry. It blinks for 5 minutes and I watch my life pass through me. Everything. They leave him up. And Tough Spot wins and pays $74, $76. Chris, you know how much money I got back?
I mean, from
Zero. I have no bet on him to win. None. Zero.
One of the lessons learned that you had, I assume, going forward.
No, I was all in on the pick six. I had no money left. So 3 legs down and the single wins. And I'm alive. We win the 6th race. We win the 7th race. And now it's the final leg of the pick six. All my top horses on the sheet are winning and a second choice, but 2 of them were second choices. Tough Spot is a single. It's a best bet. We got 2 horses going for us in a 6-horse field in the featured 8th race. Both trained by Wayne Lucas. one with Cordero aboard, one with Velasquez aboard. And by that time, everyone in the clubhouse knew the Wizard was alive for his life. Everyone. I was a likable guy. Never made waves. The only people that hated me was the Centaur, Flocka Lawton, Connie Murgis, and National Handicap. That's it. Those were my enemies. Everyone else liked me. So everyone knows Wizard's alive. And Joe turns to me and he said, Wiz, we're set to win this huge pick six, but we got to get something out of this race. I got a friend who I knew at the racetrack. His name was Doc Bird, the father of the great legendary point guard, Sue Bird. Doc Bird was a brain surgeon, but he only practiced his brain surgery 2 days a year to keep his license. He was a horse player, full-time, one of the best, a chartist, guy that charted. It's fantastic. And I knew him. He was the guy when we were sick. He would sit us down. We'd say, he'd put a stick in our mouth and write us a prescription for an antibiotic. He was our doctor, Doc Bird. So Joe goes, we got to borrow $10,000 from the doc. Doc had money in the vault in the back of the track, huge better. I go, what are we going to do with the $10,000? He says, we're going to bet against ourselves. We're going to box exactas, and we got to get 10, 20,000 out of this race. I said to Joe, I don't know how to figure this crap out. Like, I'll make mistakes. He goes, don't worry, I'll do it. So Joe asked Doc, lend him $10,000. We're either going to hit the pick six and make the money and give him back the 10, and he could cash the ticket for tax purposes if he wants it, because he needed to have winners to take off his losses. You know how that works. And then the doc says, sure, I'll take 10,000 out of the vault. Gives Joe the 10,000. Joe maps out the bet. Betting against us. It's not a big field, so he could do the math and figure it out. I was scared to death, because imagine if he made a mistake, we lose the pick six and he doesn't hit the exact. God, I didn't even want to go there. So Joe does that. And it's post time. And there's like 6 horses in the race. It wasn't a big field. One of my horses was 3-5 and the other's 2-1. One was a speed horse and one was a dead closer. Cordero was on the speed horse. Guns the speed horse to the lead. Duels, 2 turns. His horse is dead at the top of the stretch. I have 1 horse left, and it's the closer, John Velasquez. John Velasquez was a young rider, like just got his apprentice at Monmouth. I mean, he was just at the beginning of his career, way back. So the horse starts moving, and he's 5th, he's 4th, he's 3rd, he's still about 6 lengths behind the leader. And you know what the crowd was saying? It was Wizard, Wizard. It was like it rose to a crescendo. And all I heard was, I was like numb, watching this horse move, picking off horses one by one. And all you heard in the crowd in the clubhouse was the chant Wizard. And I put my binoculars down at the 8th pole, And I turned to Joe and I said, we won. He hadn't taken the lead yet, but it was over. We won. We hit the pick six. And I'm thinking we won $200,000. One other guy who had bought the wizard sheet that day, he had gotten somebody to get the sheet and take and from a newsstand and send him a copy from copy machine place. You know, he had my sheet. He was at Monticello Raceway betting the pick six. It cost him $4. He was the other guy. So we only won $100,000. We gave Doc the ticket, paid him back his 10, paid him back his money. He wanted the ticket for his own purposes. We paid him some more money. I remember me and Joe split up $40,000+. I was wearing a sports jacket and I put half the money in one insert of the jacket and the other half on the other side. And we rented a limo. We wanted cash, no check. Limo dropped me off first, 119th Street. And I had decided that I was going to act depressed. Came home. I wanted to surprise Noreen. I came in and she said, how did it go? I said, I'm done. Time to look for a job. She went into the living room and our dining room table was in the kitchen. It was where you rest a coffin in a funeral home. It was a table where I got it from a funeral home. That was our table. Took the money out and I laid the hundreds in piles on the table. She was in the other room. I said, Noreen, come in to the kitchen. I want to show you something. She came in. She saw all these hundreds in piles. And she said, what is that? I said, I won it. Thanks to Tough Spot. And she goes, I don't believe you. You robbed a bank. I said, no, I won this money, fair and square. And I said, I'll show you. I'll prove it to you, Noreen. I turned on the TV, and back then, Pack at the Track, Harvey Pack was the man. He was the guy. This was the racing show. Many, many people tuned in to Pack at the Track, especially on a Saturday. WOR, Channel 9. Biggest show. Turned it on. Aired at 6:30. 6:30. Pack at the Track comes on. And he opens up his show by saying, you cannot believe what happened today. He said, this maniac they call the Wizard. I never talked to Harvey Pack. I didn't even know. I loved him. I grew up with him, but I never actually had physical contact with Harvey Pack. He goes, this lunatic leaves a family restaurant business and thinks that he could become a professional handicapper. A moron. This is how Harvey talks, right? A moron. He's down to his last legs. He goes partners in a pick six. Let's see how this moron does. So they get to the pick six races, and they do the third race, the fourth race. They get to the fifth race. Pack goes. This guy had the audacity and the nerve to think that he could single this garbage can named Tough Spot, who's been beaten 90 lengths in his last 3 starts. with a horrible rider and a horrible trainer. This guy's a lunatic. In all my years of being part of racing, I've never heard such a moronic statement, moronic, thing a guy does. And he's educated. He's not educated, he's an idiot. He shows the race and he shows the inquiry. And he goes, "You want to know something? He's even a bigger idiot. His single wins and he has no money on it. Zippo. Nothing." Shows the sixth race, the seventh race. Then the eighth race comes and he shows it. And horse wins. And he says, "I've never, 70 years of my life, or however old he is, I've never heard a story like this, ever. The wizard deserves the world. You have to buy a sheet just as a thank you for this story." The next day, I sold 300 sheets by half an hour before first post. I told Noreen, "Print up 400. We're going to sell them all." And that's the start and the birth of the wizard.
That's a great story, and a lot of colorful characters and experiences along the way. So let's shift gears now and talk about today and where you are as a horse player, and a little bit about how you approach the game in 2023. So first of all, let's just spend a little time on your handicapping. It sounds like you really focus on trainer angles and what you call larcenous behavior. Can you just tell us a little bit more about how you suss out the potential larceny and use that to inform your play?
Well, I mean, I am an instinctual handicapper. I don't use numbers. My form is never marked up. I don't, there's little things I might put on the form, but I just look at the race and I see how it sets up. Dead trainers are dead trainers. Great trainers that win races are great. They win races. I see if there's, how the race sets up. I'm not smart enough to use all the numbers and the stuff that's available now. I don't want to. I do my own work, my own thing. And my own thing is handicap the race, put all the things that I've known in 60 something years of handicapping, and it's a feel. It's just a feel. So are my wagering strategies that I give out on my sheet. Every race is a different type of wager. Chris, I can't tell you that I do anything in particular. I sit down, I watch races carefully. I have a very instinctual feel of how a horse moves. I look for certain things in watching replays. I don't like horses to watch because I don't want to be a slave to when they come back next time and they're just in the wrong spot. So every race is a different puzzle. And I try to solve the puzzle with nothing in particular that I do. It's like I have a lot of tools in my tool chest. And I pull the tool out I need when I need it. That's it. It's really simple 101 handicapping based on all my years of experience. And that's it. And even the wager, some races deserve a trifecta. Some races just deserve a win bet. Some races exactas. There's a sequence it's good for a pick 3 or pick 4. All I could tell you is I do the work for me, like an artist. Da Vinci painted for Da Vinci. I do the handicapping and produce my products at wizardracingsports.com and drf.com. I produce them, I put them out there, and I just say, you want it? You want to buy it? Buy it. If you don't, don't. And after all these years of doing what I'm doing, I still make more money than anybody else in the industry and have made more money selling products by far. It's not even remotely close to anybody in 30, almost 40 years of business. So that's the proof. That's the bottom line. I guess I'm still doing stuff right and doing a good job. People still respect my work because they know I give a damn. And they know I know what I'm doing, win or lose. The effort's there. So there's no methodology. There's no, it's a feel. It's a feel. I can't explain my brain why, other than it's what I lived my life doing. And I know when certain principles apply and when they don't. And I pull a tool out of the tool shed, the right tool, hopefully, more times than not. That's it.
So let's talk a little bit about that in terms of certain principles you apply and the different types of wagers that you might select given a particular race or sequence of races. So what would give me an example of something that would make you want to play vertical exotics like exactas, tries, or superfectas? What would cause you to go there versus some other pool?
Well, I'll give you a situation. The Kentucky Derby this past Saturday, right? I didn't like Mage to win the race. Okay? I had my reasons. I thought 4 horses could win the race. Angel of Empire ran 3rd. I liked Tapatrice, who was awful. I liked Derma Sotagaki, who ran like 6th, no factor. And my long shot was Hit Show. So they ran 3rd, 5th, and 6th, and 7th. I got nothing. But I thought either one of those 4 were a lock to win the Derby. I was wrong. But it's not whether I'm right or wrong. It's how my thinking was to mapping out a strategy. So prior to that race, I had liked the 3 I decided to play a pick 4 ending in the Derby. So I had a strong opinion on those 4 in the Derby. I thought that the first leg, my horse was scratched I don't even know when it was scratched. Talk of the Nation, NBC just blundered and didn't even mention the scratch. It was a joke. But once he was scratched, I did an all because I thought it was wide open. And I pressed on my top other 3 selections, but I did an all because it was open race. So I had opinions in the second and third legs, like the 2 or 3, I didn't have to go very deep. So the ticket was a manageable ticket with opinions. So I have to have, if I'm playing a pick 4, if it's prices, I never want to put favorites together. Like you never want to put a pick 3 or a pick 4, like a pick 3, you never want to use 2 favorites. Like it's not really worth it, especially if they're heavy favorites. In a pick 4, you can use 2 favorites, but you better have some price. You never want to have a ticket where the 4 horses are the favorites because you're going to get undervalued. So, a pick 4 or a pick 3, you have to have, it's great if you can have a solid single. And then you have one of those sequences is a competitive race where you might have an opinion, but you're not getting too short a price. It's a wide open race. You want to give your chance. It's a blind pool. So you don't know what it's going to pay until if it's a pick 3, the first 2 legs are done, or the pick 4, the first 3 legs are done. You're betting into a blind pool, but it's good, especially the pick 5 is a good bet because the computer guys are not in the play. They're out. They're not playing this. I know they play individual races, exactas. I don't exactly know exactly what they're attacking, but they are affecting odds, obviously, on. So if you're playing a single race, you don't want to bet an 8-5 shot, 9-5 shot anymore. That day, those days are over, because you're probably after the race is being run, as it's being run, and that money's coming in, you're going from 8-5 to even money, especially if he's on the lead. And that's ironic. It's funny how that happens. So the days of the straight bet on a favorite is over. You got to try to either pass the race or turn that straight wager into an exacta or a trifecta. That's my opinion when I look at those individual races, because you're competing against the computer bettors, and there's no edge if you're going to fight them head on. The game is different now. You've got to navigate through what they're doing against what they're doing, so it gives you a chance to win, to have it not be underlaid. So betting has changed because of them. And, so I like to play pick fours. I like to play pick fives, if it's a manageable ticket. I still will bet an individual race, but my criteria is to take a much bigger price if I'm betting to win. So because of what I just talked about, I I really love General Jim on Derby Day. And he went off at 5-1, and he's one of these rare horses that actually was 7-2 and drifted to 5-1 in the last few minutes. Because I don't know what happened to the computer guys in that race, what they did, but there's massive amounts of money bet on those big days. So they're a little bit less effective. But on your normal day-to-day third race at Belmont or second race at Monmouth, forget about it. You can't bet a short price favorite. Back in the day, before they existed, if you liked an 8-5 shot, you were basically getting 8-5. You weren't going to get 6-5 or even money. So that's how you navigate through this new world of betting we're in.
So let me kind of summarize what I think I heard you say. First of all, the shorter price favorites to win, there might have been a time in your career where those were possibly good bets, but with the smart money now, especially from the teams, typically you're looking for a better price. The days of being able to bet the odds-on favorite and actually get value are gone. So
right. And I want to try to play exactas or trifectas,
right.
Especially trifectas, because they're not in those pools, and you're going to get a bigger price a lot of times, especially if you get the favorite out of there, or you get the favorite not on top, or you have the favorite on top and you got big prices underneath. You're betting into blind pools again. The exactas are not blind pools because you could see the payoffs, but who has the time to look for all the payoffs? And maybe they attack those, but it's a different game nowadays. Now it's just different. So you got to be a little bit more selective and beware in the back of your mind that these computer guys are at work. It's just, this is the reality of modern day gambling.
So so when you talked a little bit about the horizontal plays like the pick 3 and the pick 4, it sounds like you're looking for, when you get interested in those, when you pull that bet out of your toolbox, it's when you probably have one solid single and you've got some opinions on horses that aren't favorites in some of the other legs. That's what would get you interested.
Yes, yeah. If it's like I'm looking at a pick 3 and two of the horses that I like are favorites, and then one of the legs, the favorite is amongst 3 or 4 horses, I'm not going to play that pick 3 because I'm in jeopardy of having 3 favorites win in a row. And I don't want any part of that. The idea is, maybe one favorite, but not more in a pick three. And a pick four, well, if you have two favorites you really like, you better get prices on the other two legs or don't bother. Don't bother playing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk a little bit about the vertical, especially like the trifecta. What I think I heard you say there was you either like if there's a really strong horse you like on top, even if it's a favorite, you'll play that as long as you can find prices underneath. But ideally, you'd like to be able to bet against that favorite. Put somebody else on top in those tries. Is that?
Well, yeah. I don't mind putting the favorite, on top. But the best lesson I can tell your listeners is on one ticket, you must have an all in the third leg or in a superfecta in the fourth leg. You must, in a small field, five horses or six horses, you really don't belong in the trifecta. It shouldn't be a play. It's eight horses or more, in my opinion, that I would attack a trifecta, maybe seven horses. But on one ticket, I will always have an all because anything is possible in the third leg or in the super in the fourth leg. So sometimes that makes the trifecta pay off or the superfecta pay off when a bomb comes in. You can't be too precise in that leg. So you can press and be more precise after the all in the third leg. But my first bet will be like a 1x3 by all. Then I'll start doing 1x3 by 4, and I may do 3x1 by 4. Like I start with the all in the third leg and work from there. Because nobody is that good that could predict that, some bomb can't run, especially in a big field.
So you're looking for the bigger fields, at least 8 horses, to get interested in the try typically. And you always start with a kind of a all in the last leg and the last slot because it's hard to predict and there's a good chance long shots might come in there. But then you may press certain horses you like more than others in that leg. So you might have like a 1-2 all, and then maybe a 1-2-2 or something. If there's a couple horses you really like, you press that in the third leg. Is that kind of how you approach it?
Yeah. I might do 1x3 by all, 1x3 by 5. Then come back the 3x1 by 5. And if there's a lot of if it's a big field with a lot of great prices and no clear-cut favorite, I could use a 3. So say a dollar, 1 by in an 8-horse field, 1x3 by all is $18, right? I might come back 3x1 by all for 50 cents, which is $9, but only if I feel there's prices. I'm not going to chase a short price situation in a trifecta. I want big fields.
Yeah, kind of the main guidelines though is you want a big field. You always use all, in that last leg, and then you'll press your opinions depending on what they are in the for the rest of your wagers.
Yes. Yep.
What about do you play the superfecta? Same approach basically on that?
Same approach. Similar. Yeah. I like the supers because they're 10-cent supers because you could do 1x3 by 6 by all, and it's not much money. You could do, and sometimes if I have two horses that I think could run in any combination, first, second, or third, I'll do 1x1 by all if it's prices, or 1 by all by 1 by all. That could be a strategy. But the fourth leg will always be an all. It'll always be an all. Obviously, in the Derby with a 20-horse field, it's too expensive. But in a 10-horse field or something, and you wanted to, the supers are always a better bet than the trifectas, always, because nobody really understands how to play the supers. It's sort of like the ignored bet.
And so,
it's
what do you think?
Similar to the pick 5.
So let's talk about the super then. What do you think are the things that they don't understand that you do that give you an edge on those superfectas?
Well, because it's it's the trifecta and exacta and the win are ingrained in people's head, and the supers is a little too esoteric, too much. They don't realize you can take an opinion and minimize your investment by structuring a decent ticket play. It takes, the general public shies away from it because they're not used to making that play. They don't even, doesn't exist in their head. It's like, to a lot of players. To sharp guys, it exists. And people who like the supers, just like the pick five. The pick five is far better than the pick four and far better than the pick three because it's extra money. But if you have opinions, it's going to pay well. If you do hit, because people don't bet the pick five as much as there may be as much money in it or more money in it, but it's fewer people playing it.
So on the pick five, in terms of the structure, what are the things you do to try to structure your ticket in a way that gives you, the maximum chance to make a profit?
Well, for me, my budget, I'm not, a big bet for me in horse racing is 500-600 in a race. That's my comfort level. So you're not going to see me betting 2,000 in a pick five. I just don't do it. It's not, I know my comfort level, So if I have a pick five that I think I could hit, I better be able to put together a ticket that's not going to cost me more than $400 or $500, and that's probably going to require in one of those legs either a single, or if not a single, using two horses, or two in one leg, maybe three in one leg, and spread in the others. Like it can't be a 5x6 by 5x7. It's too much money. So you better have some opinions. Especially if you could have a single in one of those legs, it gives you the ability to spread more and open races in the other legs. So it's really, is that sequence doable for you financially? That it's within your budget.
So in terms of trying to keep the cost of the ticket down, then what you do is typically look for at least one single or at least a few of the legs where you can narrow your opinion down to one or two horses. And that gives you the ability maybe to spread in the races that you think are a little more wide open.
Yeah. And the most important thing is what is your budget? What is your budget in any of these plays, right? You can't map out a play that's going to exceed your comfort level. People overbet. You see it all the time in sports. It's killing, people in sports. You have to know what is, like I'm going to ask you the question, Chris. What's your comfort level in betting a race? How much?
It all depends on the race, but
Well, what's your comfort? Are you going to bet $1,000 in a race?
Sure, I'll bet $1,000 in a race.
Okay. Would you bet 5,000 in a race?
Probably not very often, for sure.
Okay. So what's your comfort level on a daily basis on a particular play? Give me a number.
Probably, $500, probably about where you're at would be what I would invest.
So if you're going to play a pick five, you're going to structure a wager that's not going to be $2,000.
No. In fact, my pick fives typically are a lot less than my vertical wagers. So.
Okay, so whatever your comfort level is, if your play feels good for that amount of money, then you'll play it. So sometimes you'll put together a ticket and it'll be $800, and you'll say, well, could I knock off a couple horses to feel comfortable betting this ticket? The answer may be yes or no, right? It's too much. The ticket is too much. The risk reward is not there for my level of betting. So you have to decide that. It's money management too. It's psychological. Betting is psychological too, okay? I mean, it's not, you can map out wagers and, come up with good wagers, but what are you comfortable betting on that wager? You know, so if you're attacking a particular play, you know, you could do it in the tries and the pick threes because it doesn't cost as much. But when you start going into pick fives or pick sixes, you've got to, know, can I make this play? Do I feel comfortable making this play with the amount of money I am comfortable losing?
So in the pick five, it sounds like you do a single ticket. You're not doing multiple tickets, or typically you're
No,
having.
I will. I'll scale it down. I'll try to if I can map out something within my budget that has multiple tickets, where my strongest opinions could be on one ticket, where I might have a 5 by 2 by 3 by 1 by 4, and then maybe I go 2 by, instead of using all 5 in the first leg, I favor 2 or 3. I'll make multiple tickets, but the total amount on the whole ticket will not exceed what I'm comfortable playing. I don't want to overbet. It has to fall within my budget for that race.
So when you're looking at a horizontal sequence and you're playing the pick five, will you play a pick three or a pick four within that sequence, or do you limit? I mean, how do you?
Usually not.
Okay.
Not.
So if you like to pick five, you'll play it. If you don't, maybe you like a pick three or pick four, but you're typically not
Yes.
overlapping them. Okay.
No, I'm not overlapping. I don't like doing that. And if I lose a leg, the first leg of the pick five, I'm hesitant to go and chase the pick four. It's almost like that was the play, I'm out. I might play the pick four, but when you start chasing after a loss, it usually doesn't work out to your benefit.
Okay. So it sounds like you feel that when you get to the more exotic wagers like a superfecta and a pick five, that it becomes more of a how you structure your tickets is more important than maybe even your handicapping opinion, although obviously both are important, because most people just don't have any real concept of how to structure tickets for those complex
Yes,
wagers.
exactly. Yep. You have to marry the two. You have to marry three things. You have to marry handicapping, wagering strategy, and comfort level. All three. And they're all equally important. They all tie into one another.
So you mentioned how there's a lot to the mental side of the game besides, just the ticket structure and handicapping. There's the ups and downs, tough beats and losing streaks and, even big scores. So how do you have anything that you've learned in that regard to help you kind of keep an even keel through all that
Yes.
mental challenges?
Yep. Flush the last race behind you. Don't think about it. Forget it. If you have a bad day, move on. Think about the mistake you made. Realize what you did good and what you did bad, but don't dwell on that. Move on. Have a short memory. Don't let what yesterday happened affect you today. Every day is a new day. That's why you got to protect your bankroll. We don't have unlimited money. Like, if you have a $5,000 bankroll, why would you blow $1,000 your first day? Like, it's just stupid.
So
You got to
maybe
have some structure.
Yeah, maybe talk a little bit more about money management. You had mentioned that, any sort of guidelines or principles that you apply to that?
Well, I don't want to give percentages like how much of your bankroll. I don't, it's a feel, but you know, I think it's first of all recognize what your comfort level is for a particular day that you're willing to lose, or a race what you're willing to lose on a particular race. So if you got $2,000 bankroll, that's earmarked for betting horses. You don't want to lose, more than $200 on a day. You don't want to lose $400. And you have, if you're looking to, if you're going to Saratoga for the weekend and you got $2,000, that's different. You don't play every day. Bet 1,000 if you feel like it, and then reserve 1,000 for the next day. If all you're doing is playing 2 days, or like Derby. Okay, Derby day. A lot of people just play Derby day, right? Well, what are you willing to lose on Derby day? Okay, well, I've got $1,000. I'm going to go. Well, there's 14 races. In the first 4 races, you don't want to lose. You have $1,000. You don't want to lose $500 in the first 4 races. It's common sense. It's not statistics or numbers. It's like, okay, where are your opinions? Are your opinions later in the card? Are you following the wizard? Wizard's got 3 best bets, the 4th, the 8th, the 14th. Well, by the time they go to the 14th race, you better have a couple $100 left, because you kind of have to do your work and know how the day is structured, where you want to make your bigger bets and where you want to lay off. But you don't want to overbet. You want to always have bullets left in the holster.
So you mentioned big days. Do you yourself target those big days like the Derby?
Love them. Love them. I love them.
So how do you approach those differently than a regular
well, because
day?
There's a lot of money in the pools, a lot of dumb money. There's a lot of dumb money. It's not like a typical aqueduct in December. There's a lot of money in the pools that, inflate or deflate prices based on, commentators, perceptions, names, whatever. There's a lot of, now, yeah, you're going to get some sharp money. Look at Two Phils. I didn't like Two Phils to win the race, and he almost did. He was 8-1. I made him 15 to 20 to 1. There was a reason he was 8-1. I missed it. I didn't want to see it. I didn't believe it. But I also knew that, Tapit Trice was 5-1, and I made him 8-1. Like I didn't, I made him a contender, but I knew he'd be overbet. Forte, who was scratched, I was going to bet against him if he ran, and he would have been 3-1, and I made him, 5-1. So, you also, the better you are at making an odds on, if you do the work and you could set your own odds line on a horse, what you're willing to take, that's good too. That's really big. It's a very important thing to do. That's understanding the field, understanding what is this horse's odds worth relative to the field. So if a horse is, you make him 3-1 and he's 8-5, is he a play? No. I might play him in exotic somehow, but I ain't making a win bet on him. Not even my win bets are like far and few between. Like on a 9-race card, I might make 2 win bets, if that, or give out 2 win bets. I'm looking to hit the exotics. I'm a sucker for that. I don't want any part of win bets, especially horses at short prices. I'll give a win bet out if I know the horse is between 4-1 and 10, and up. If I know I have a chance to get 4-1. Sometimes these lines makers stink. They're awful. They shouldn't even be hired, and they make horses prices that you're not even going to get close to.
So that was
understanding all that.
Yeah, and that was good. I've had some people ask me questions about, you talk about value all the time in the show. Can you explain it? And I think you kind of did a good job there in the win pool. You said you make a horse 2-1 on your line, and that's your opinion on that horse's chances of winning. For you, value on that horse would be something significantly higher than 2-1. Then you're getting some value on that bet.
Even 5-2 or 3-1 is value.
But Yeah, on the inverse of that, if it's even money or 6 to 5, it's clearly a
No.
bad bet based on your opinion. So that value is
Yes.
really
Yep.
based on your opinion of that horse's chances. It's not anybody else's opinion. It's what you think your opinion is. And like you said,
Right.
if you can go through that exercise of actually assigning, what you think is a fair odds for that horse, then you can make that determination based on the actual
I,
off odds.
I'm great at that. I'm great at setting the right line.
And that's how you identify value when you decide to bet on that one or two horses on the card,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Yep. I had a horse yesterday at Indiana Grand that I was, eyeballing. And he came back in a spot and I made him 6 to 5, 7 to 5. I got 9 to 5, even though he only paid 560 or 580. That was value because I made him like 460, 440.
Right. You
That
can
was
have,
value.
and I think that's important that, some people think value means a long shot, but it really just
It
means,
doesn't.
is it a better price than you think the horse should
Yes,
be?
exactly. Right.
And what you're saying isn't 40 years ago when you first started, you could find value in 8 to 5 shots sometimes, or at least a lot more often than today, where the money's a little sharper in those 8 to 5 shots, or what you think should be an 8 to 5 shot now, but back in 40 years ago might have gone off at 2 to 1 or 5 to 2. Now they're going off at even money or 6 to 5.
Yes, because of the computer better. So you gotta, if you're making a horse 8 to 5, you better hope that he's 3 to 1, 5 to 2, because more more than not, um, you know, like, okay, so your horse is 8 to 5, and you think he should be 2 to 1. You're obviously not going to bet him at 8 to 5. But let's say he's 2 to 1. You're making him 2 to 1, and he's 3 to 1, right, on the board with 1 minute to go or 0 minutes to go. You made him 2 to 1. He's 3 to 1. Well, you're going to make a bet at 3 to 1 because you're getting value. But what's happening today is with the computer betters, that 3 to 1 could go down to 8 to 5 before you know it, while the race is being run. So now you went from value to no value, and you say, "What the hell just happened?" That didn't happen in the past, in when I was growing up playing horses. So value to me now is, it's a bigger range. If I make a horse 3 to 1, he better be 5 to 1 to protect the buffer for the computer betters to knock him down at 3 to 1. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're saying that, knowing that especially the shorter price horses tend to get bet down some at the end if they look like overlays to sharp players, then you've got to sort of take that into account and make sure that the odds are significantly above what you think are fair value
Yes.
before you make a
Yes.
play.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
And and
Can't
I
get too high.
and that's what makes it a little tougher today than it was when you first
Yes.
started. That's one of the big changes.
Exactly. Exactly.
So you said that's one of you think your strengths of being able to kind of estimate what are the fair odds for horses in a race. Do you play fixed odds wagers at all? Is that part of
No,
your game?
no, no, I don't.
Okay.
Nope.
What about carryovers? You said talked about your big score was a carryover and a pick six. Is that still a big part of your game? Or do you chase carryovers at tracks or sequences you might
I
not
did.
normally
I
the
did
other
this
way?
Saturday. I did this Saturday. There was a big pick six carryover at Turf Paradise, and I went partners in a pick six with my friend. I like chasing those, especially when they're 20 cent pick six, like the rainbow pick six. But I'll never play a pick six unless there's not a. It has to be a multiple day carryover, multiple days, because then you're playing for free money, like extra money put into the pool. I'm never going to bet a pick six on day one.
So basically, you're saying you get that reduced takeout with the carryover, sometimes
Yes,
even positive expectation.
yes,
That's very enticing to you.
yes.
What about the
Yep.
jackpot carryovers? Do you only play those when it's a forced out mandatory, or will you play it?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Otherwise, it's a sucker bet.
That's a some opinions shared by every single guest I've had on the podcast.
Okay.
So
Well, then every other guest is smart.
yeah, they're all
You've
pretty
chosen the
unanimous
right
on
guest.
that.
You've
Yeah.
chosen the right guests.
What about foreign racing? Do you play any European,
None.
Hong Kong?
None.
None. Okay, so
Nope.
you're just strictly North America.
Yep. What I know.
Okay, how about record keeping? Do you keep records on your
Yes.
wagering? And like,
Absolutely.
sort of what kind of records do you keep, and how does that inform what you do?
The bottom line, like, what track, I have something that does that. So how much I bet, what my rebate is, um, what my return on investment is at every track and the type of wager I made. I have all that. But I
Does
want to
that
see it.
so? Are there, based on that, or just your opinion of the racing? Are there certain circuits that you play and focus on, or certain kinds of
Yes.
races?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like,
Saratoga, Keeneland, big racing days.
the bigger, the more high level meets, you play much at the smaller tracks then, or?
Yeah, I like money in the pools. The more money, the better. Yep.
You mentioned rebates, so you're obviously getting some rebates. How big are your rebates, and does that influence what tracks or pools you play in?
No, but I get a big rebate because I'm a big bettor. And if you play without a rebate and you're doing this game seriously and you're betting any kind of money, right? You're an idiot.
So that, especially in those higher takeout, more exotic pools,
It doesn't
in
matter.
particular.
If you're not getting a rebate and you're betting the game every day, it's decent money. If this is something you choose to do as a hobby and you're betting decent money every day, and I'm not saying $20 a day, I'm saying anything over 500 or more, and you don't get, and you're just getting free pass performances, I'll be your bookmaker. Sign up with the wizard.
All right. How about other gambling? You talked about sports betting a little bit. Do you bet sports, or
Absolutely,
poker?
a lot.
So
a lot of money.
So that's a significant part of your gambling. So do you learn anything from betting on sports that you apply to horses or vice versa?
Yeah, value, value, discipline, everything. Everything applies to sports. Most important is what is the right line for the game? Where are the linesmen wrong or right? What are your edges? Like, what is it about the matchups that you like? And, is the point spread, sports is, like, public perception drives the lines a lot, just like they do in horses. So, sometimes, there's a line in sports that doesn't feel right. Like, why is this team only 3-point favorites when they're that much better? Well, there's a reason. Vegas is smart. The linesmen are smart. So, um, you've got to not be sucked in to what looks obvious. You have to. The psychology is similar. It's just a different sport.
Yeah, it sounds like
It
you're
would
pretty
take me
much.
hours to go into sports betting because I lived in Vegas recently for 5 years to understand it. I bet a lot of money. And I actually, on my website, I sell sports handicapping selections. I have a great handicapper, and I'm the only one in the country ever in the history of sports gambling that actually post their tickets. I buy a $500 ticket on every game I give out, and I post it with the win and loss record. Everything is detailed, and everything. If you go to wizardracingsports.com and you go to sports, you're going to see something you've never seen in the history of the game. It's credibility, honesty, integrity. And that lacks in sports handicappers. It's all bullshit. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's nonsense. And that's what I built my career on: honesty, integrity, and the truth. I'm not looking at, you don't have to buy my product, but I'm going to tell you the truth.
Yeah, and it sounds like you pretty much apply the same principles to any type of gambling, whether it's on the horses or on sports.
It's when I bet America's Got Talent, or I bet on the hot dog, Nathan's hot dog tournament. Everything applies, the same principles.
All right. So what if you were going to sum up what you think are the biggest lessons learned that you had over the 40 years, what would be the biggest lesson learned that you take away or that you apply?
Be focused, be disciplined, have a plan, have a game plan. Understand your bankroll, respect your bankroll. Never always have bullets to fire. Don't chase. Be honest with yourself. Don't bullshit people when they ask you if you're a winner or a loser. If you're a loser, admit it. Admit your flaws, learn from them. Try to do your own work. Yes, if you want to, buy, whether it's my product or someone else's product or whatever, use it as a guide, as part of your arsenal. But in the end, learn the game. Learn the game, figure what tools work best for you. Don't read anything. Don't read these racing writers and opinions. They're all nonsense. Many of them lack talent. It's just, you listen to, my best friend is the mute button. I don't want to hear anything. Form your own decisions, form your own opinions, and realize you always got something to learn. Every day I got something to learn, and realize you're going to make mistakes, but learn from those mistakes. Even after 60 plus years betting, I make mistakes. I make fewer, but I make them. And anyone that says that they don't is full of crap. Those are my lessons.
So out of those, what would you say is the biggest mistake most players make that if they would, fix that, they would be much more successful?
Bullshitting themselves.
So be honest with yourself.
Yes, be honest with yourself, and try to find a perfect balance in life. Like I've been guilty of this, where I've spent too much time worrying about chasing winners and chasing and betting and all that. Find a balance where it becomes part of your enjoyment, but doesn't take over your life. Enjoy it. Enjoy the game. Learn the game. Enjoy the game. And there's so much negativity out there. So don't look at Twitter. Don't look at social media. It's garbage. It's all garbage. You can't learn very much from watching, listening, reading Twitter. All right, it's nonsense. Most of it. Occasionally, there's people. I get a call from somebody. I don't read anything. I don't care. Got some big racing columnist or TV personality. I don't even know what his name is. Forget. I didn't even care. I get a call. You got to read this. I go, okay, I'll read it. Tom Amello told me, read this. Says, and this is a guy that's known all over the country. Put an asterisk on Mage winning the Derby. An asterisk. Because Forte didn't run. Like, what an idiot. Like, what is Forte not running having to do with Madge winning the Kentucky Derby fair and square? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's stupid. It's ignorance. Twitter is full of ignorant people that have no opinion. Stay away from it. Do your own work. Learn yourself. Learn the game. Talk to somebody that actually knows the game. I'd like to talk to your other 7 guests or 6 guests because they're knowledgeable. You learn something from them. There's very few of these guys. Okay? There's very few wizards out there.
I like that. There's very few wizards. So I also like to ask, this is kind of a hypothetical question, but like if you had a magic wand as a wizard, this fits pretty well, and you could change something about racing, what would it be that you'd want to change?
Wow. Get rid of the industry, throw them all out, hire me. I'll put the people in. I think the game is in the toilet. I think it's run by a bunch of idiots. They don't understand the gambler. They could care less about us. Drugs, it's all messed up. They have everything wrong. It's a joke. It's a complete joke the way they run this game. And I wish that if I had a wand, I'd want to be the commissioner of this game. And the first thing I'd do is toss everyone out. All of them.
The wizard for the czar of racing.
Yeah, right. Petition for me. I'll clean this game up. I may have a bullet in my head in a week, but and I do go on Twitter once in a while to post my own stuff, which is the truth. And when No Balls won on Derby Day, I said it's named after the racing industry. They have no balls.
It's nobles, though. They don't.
I don't care if it's nobles. I make it no balls. They have no balls to clean up this game, and that's what I said. And I actually, the guy that wrote that article that they should put an asterisk on Madge's name in the Derby, I wrote such a scathing thing. Twitter contacted me and said, "We're going to kick you off if you allow this to do this." So I pushed the envelope, but I don't give a shit. I don't give a damn. I speak my piece. I speak my piece, and I'm standing up for the better. I have the right to. I've put 60 plus years in this game, 40 years professionally with integrity, and I have every right to talk my mind. And I don't care if you like it or not. I care about the better. Without the better, there's no game. They all can go. They'll all be baristas in Starbucks. All these suits, all these people running the game, where would they be without us? But they treat us like second-class citizens and idiots, and we're not. We support the game. We're the people. And when you let people get away with the stuff they're getting away with, you have these vets that are just, you have who wins 35% races like back in the day? When Charlie Whittingham won 20%, it was a great year. Come on, man. You don't win 35% if you're not doing something. And then all the debts on the racetrack, all the stuff that they're doing, all the stuff that's happening right in front of our eyes, it's disgusting. It's absolutely despicable. But I'm still in the game because I just, I don't like it. I'm not the judge and jury, as I said earlier in this podcast. I have to do my job, and my job is to pick winners and explain why. That's it. But if you ask me what my wand would do, what I wanted to do is to wipe all this crap out. Get them all out. Get them all out. They're all, and I would change the way the game is run with different laws for every state, different laws for this and that and this and that. It's a joke. What sport doesn't have a commissioner and some unity, like uniform laws? I mean, you know what it's like, Chris? Imagine an NBA team, the three-point line is at a different distance in every arena. That's racing. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's a travesty. And they should just blow up the game and restart it again with the wizard as the commissioner. Because I know who as stewards. The stewards are a bunch of wine stewards. They're not stewards. I put a handicapper. I put one of your 6 guys. They'd be at 6 different racetracks in the booth. They're idiots. They're morons, most of them. They're on the 7th martini and by the 8th race. It's ridiculous. The whole thing is just turned upside down. It's not like it used to be.
But how do you really feel?
Look, you asked me a question.
Yeah,
You gave me my wand. You gave
I
me
did.
my
I
wand.
gave.
You posed the question. I don't expect you to delete it from the podcast. I'm telling it like it is. You don't have to like me. I don't care. The industry hates my guts. They hate me. That's a fact. I'm not even allowed in the Naira press box. I sit in a beach chair at Saratoga behind the pizza stand in the grandstand. I could care less. I can't stand them, what they've done to this game. This great game that I grew up on. And look at the breed. Horses breaking down. Horses win. Old school handicapping doesn't work anymore. Horses win with no 2-year-old foundation, and then you don't see them after 3 years age. They don't have. There's no Damascus, Buck Passer, Arts and Letters, Chouvies, Doc. You don't see these horses anymore. What Chug McGahee, if he wins 20%, that's a great year. He's a horseman. Charlie Whittingham, you have guys winning at 35%. Come on. They've all of a sudden they win 35% when the great trainers of John Nehru won 20%. One of the greatest horsemen of all time. You don't win. The whole game is just freaking ridiculous now. It's absurd what's going on. The telecasts are there. You listen. I can't even listen to these telecasts. On Derby Day, there was a horse I made best bet that was scratched, and they never even mentioned the scratch. A big race, turf race. They never mentioned it before the fact, after the fact, because they could care less about the bettor. They care about putting the moron on with the fancy hat and the stupid dress and all that. Yeah, they had a great feel-good story with Cody's Wish. Everybody cries. Everybody cries, including me. Beautiful, wonderful story. But balance it off with okay, this Talk of the Nation was scratched. We're delaying post time 3 minutes so you can reevaluate your bets. That's the furthest thing away from their minds. That's moronic. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. That's all I got to say.
Well, no, that was very good, and I can tell you that many of the previous guests have shared some of the same opinions that you offered there. You mentioned Harvey Pack a lot. Despite all its problems, it's still the greatest game, and like Harvey said, it's the most fun you can have with the lights on. That's the sad part, is that it's such a great game. It's managed to limp along even now, despite all the things that you talked about. It's still
It's caught up though. It's caught up. The game is heading for the tubes. Yes, there'll be the Derby. There'll be 150,000 people there betting all kinds of money on the Derby. There'll be less for the Preakness, and then there'll be an uptick in the Belmont. There's Saratoga, Keeneland, the Breeders' Cup. That's it. The rest of the days, forget about it. It's done. They've cooked the goose, the golden goose. Okay? So, yes, it is the greatest game. The greatest game is watching these wonderful horses run. And they're ruining them. They're ruining the game. They're ruining the beauty of the horse and the bettor, the respect for the bettor that supports this game. Because all these breeders, you can't even imagine what happens in auction sales. What's going on, the corruption there. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And you know something? I'm right. I'm 1,000% right, because I know it from the inside and the outside. I've lived and breathed this game 60 years. Everyone knows the wizard. Everyone knows, and they may not think I'm I'm not the best handicapper. I profess to just do my work, and that's it. But I'll tell it like it is, and I'll give you my best work, and I'll be honest. And I know a lot of people.
So you kind of trash Twitter, but you are on Twitter. Why don't you give out your Twitter handle in case some of the listeners want to follow you at least until you get kicked off?
Yeah, well, it's Wizard Picks. And look, I say nice things about people too. Don't get me wrong. I try to, believe me. There are a lot of nice things to say. But when I have something to say that's not nice, I'm going to go after you. I'm going to go after, because I'm sick and tired of this nonsense. I'm sick and tired of the crap that goes on ruining this game. I'm just sick and tired of the deaths. I'm sick and tired of the juice trainers, even though I need them for my handicapping. I would rather them go away and let's handicap straight up on a, fair and square, right? I'm sick of the vets. I'm sick of the bullshit that comes out of these trainers' mouths. I'm sick of the owners talking nonsense and just it's this. But I love horses. I own horses. My trainer's honest. I don't want a drug on that horse. If there was a freaking anything, they need certain medication for, like, I just claimed a horse that his mouth was bleeding, from a wrong bit that was in the mouth. Of course, I want the dentist to come and clean the teeth and fix the mouth, give medication to the mouth, or, certain things that aren't drugs. It's to help the horse, because something's not right. But I'm not going to inject the knees or inject the legs. I'm not going to do that garbage. I'm not going to do the stuff that these vets, like, I get rid of all the private vets and hire public track vets that are responsible for horses. It's governed. It's regulated. It's not like this vet is for Todd Pletcher. This vet is for Brad Cox. This is it. Like, get rid of them all. Get rid of them all. Revamp this. There's a reason these horses are dying. I don't know why they're dying. I can't tell you why. Look, Safi Joseph had to scratch all his horses, right? On Derby Day, because he had 2 deaths, 2 heart attacks. You read that, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Me and you could have a heart attack a day apart and die. Look, it's unfortunate, but they didn't yet catch he used drugs. Maybe the horse has died of a heart attack, but he can't run. So he can't run. Why? Oh, they're afraid. Another horse is going to drop dead from Safi Joseph. Well, 2 horses died on Derby Day. They weren't trained by Safi Joseph. Like, he's convicted. He's already convicted before the fact. Like, he's guilty. He's already guilty. Ban him. So you're affecting the owners, the poor owners that pay to get their horses to the Derby. And that's like the biggest day, because 2 horses from Safi Joseph die, right? Like, okay, well, they could have died of a heart attack. Have you shown it? Were they drugged? Do you have evidence of that? Richard Duttrow, 10 years for being an idiot. 10 years from being an idiot because he opened his mouth about Big Brown and he did a few things. Okay, 10 years. But you got guys training that had snake venom or whatever the shit they use, right? They're allowed, they get a slap on the wrist, right? Richard Duttrow was a true horseman. Yeah, he's an idiot, but saying some of the stuff he does. Look at Bob Baffert, the greatest trainer, one of the greatest trainers of all time. Like, okay, he said some stupid things. He made a few mistakes, but, Churchill Downs, ban him from the Kentucky Derby for 2 years. He cannot run a horse in Kentucky. Okay, but he can run a horse in New York. He can run in the Preakness. But us at Churchill Downs, he hurt us. He hurt his image. Medina Springs dies of a heart attack. He's a drugger. Come on. Baffert's not a drugger. Maybe he did some few stupid things. He ain't a drugger. Said some stupid things. Come on. They love to hang out the sacrilegious pig, the guy. They love to show their might and hang you to dry, just to show, I'm the powerful Churchill Downs. I'm the king. I'll do what we want to do. It's just another in just ruining this game. That's it. That's all I got to say. Hello?
Oh, so let's try to end on a high note.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a high note.
yeah. So just, what do you think still is, the best thing about racing today?
A pari-mutuel game. It's a pari-mutuel game, and it's just fun. The game is fun. If you take away all the stuff that I talked about, the game it's a challenging game. It's like doing a crossword puzzle. It's beautiful. The horses are beautiful. Racing is beautiful. Gamblers, when we're together and we're talking, it's great. It's great. There's a lot of good people in this game that do what I do. There's a lot of good people. They have good stories. They're good. They are what is good in the game. There's a lot of good people, but not the industry.
And that's a great note to end it on. So I want to thank you, Michael. This has been a blast. I really enjoyed the stories, and really thank you for sharing your insights that you've learned over 60 years, 40 years, making a living at this game. So really appreciate that. Also, I really appreciate our listeners. And thank you for listening. And most importantly, may you boldly go where no horse player has gone before.